Hello folks and welcome to the show. My name is Asa Morris and this is Weird Week. Thank you so much for joining us, whether again or for the first time. Make sure to hit up the link tree in the description for all the links to all the things, the merch, the socials, the podcast. We're on an off week this week, but maybe go check out an episode that you might have missed. And of course, the Patreon, especially the Patreon. Every single little bit helps. Even just a couple of bucks a month. And as a matter of fact, I used last month's Patreon earnings to buy a couple new mics for a future project. So I want you to know that your help does help. So thank you very much. Also, make sure you go do the big 5. That's like, comment, sub, bell, share. I still don't know what the clip feature does or if it helps. I'm probably gonna lose interest in it immediately after recording this. But if it helps, it helps. Anyway, bing, bang, boom. That is the business. So let's just get right into it. Because folks, Sunday was the 18th, the second and seemingly most popular of the THROAWAYLIEN dates. My plan was to just kind of keep an eye on literally everything that happened that day, just in case. There were, of course, a number of UFO sightings, a number of loud boom reports, and even in one case, a sky trumpet report. However, that's not abnormal, as I think this show has shown you. It just wasn't out of the so-called ordinary at first. In anticipation of the day, a Reddit user on the THROAWAYLIEN subreddit posted a link to a live meteor tracker channel on YouTube. At exactly midnight UTC, which is essentially the closest thing we have to just like a global Earth time, this happened. What you are looking at is something massive, apparently entering our atmosphere. Since that night, I have gone back through the recordings of the tracker. I've watched it on and off for the last week. And not seeing anything more than the occasional blip, I began to ask a number of other folks how often something like that happens. Never. It doesn't. Occasionally extended blips, but so far never to this extent. Something that size is so far unheard of. And it happened precisely at the beginning of July 18th. Obviously, there is no official explanation for this. There are a number of mundane possibilities. Equipment failure, anomalous weather, but in the end, so no, ETs did not hold a press conference on the White House lawn, but something very strange did in fact happen on July 18th. Also on Sunday, a very odd video popped up on Reddit from user r/plate, who had apparently been perusing some emails on WikiLeaks from former astronaut Edgar Mitchell to the former chief of staff, John Podesta. Within the emails, multiple video attachments were found, including this very interesting one from the NASA shuttle mission STS-120.
Houston Discovery, one last thing we could do while we're getting ready to go to bed. We have the OPSS birth video. We've got it loaded up into DTV, and we could zip it down to you if you like.
Okay, Pambo, I copy that. I'll need just a minute to check. If turns out we can't tell if the camera illuminators are off unless we power up the camera. So if you could confirm that for us, that'd be great. And then also if you could check the forward payload bay floodlights are off. And I'll get you an answer here in just a minute.
Okay, I can confirm all of the floods are off. And we can confirm that the illuminators are off as well.
Okay, we copy all. Thanks.
Now, there is a processed, slightly cleaner version of the video that I will link to in the show description, but I felt it was necessary to show you the original, especially with some of that original audio. Last week, I talked a little bit about Jimmy Church's paywall disclosure event, and I won't say much more about it here. Except that on Monday, the Lou Elizondo portion of the event got leaked. As I mentioned last week, not much new was said. However, there are a couple of interesting moments that cropped up, including this one, where Lou clearly agrees with that Twitter user from last week, FacelessBeurocrat, who may or may not actually be Lou.
But so that 17-page count seems pretty low. So what's your answer to that?
Well, it's simply not. I think there's some confusion. I think maybe some people may be confused with an executive summary that may have been provided, but the actual report was north of 70 pages, including endnotes, and that's real, and that's that'll come out at some point. I think someone's trying to willingly deceive the American people by saying, "Oh, it was only 17 pages." I think, when you go through PAO offices, as we've seen, they don't always get things right. And when they say, "Oh, yeah, the executive summary that was provided to Congress was 17 pages," oh, okay, 17 pages. But that wasn't the complete report. The complete report with endnotes was north of 70 pages, and that's just a fact.
Or this fun little moment where Lou just won't talk about crash retrievals.
Did you ask him about this? I mean, it's right there. It's in the New York Times.
I didn't have to ask him. I already knew. I'm not going to go into more detail on that. I didn't find out from Eric. Put it that way.
Okay. How many craft do we have? And are they?
I'm talking as it relates to him briefing the Senate. I'm not going to go into. I'm not going to discuss about what you're saying, referring to crash retrievals. I am not going to go into that. I cannot. I will not. I'm not going to speculate what we might or might not have, how much of it we have, where it's at. I'm not going to do it.
Okay, so not crash retrievals. How many were just given to us?
I can't answer that. Good question. Not going there.
Have we been able to fly them?
Can't go there.
Controls? How big are the seats?
Can't go there.
Do they have a bedroom? If you're flying across the universe, the Milky Way, you got to have a place to sleep. Is there a kitchenette?
I'm not going to speculate on that.
I mean, they have to eat. The reason why, and sure, we can giggle about this a little bit, but Eric Davis was allowed to say this. He was allowed. Somebody said, you can say this. He got the information from somewhere, whether he saw it or not.
You need to talk to him. You need to talk to him about it.
But for it to make it into the New York Times, somebody's vetting something, somebody's checking on something, and it made it into print, which, in my opinion, Lou, is probably the most important couple of sentences in human history. It's right there.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with your assessment that it's important.
You're just going to let it go.
I am not going to discuss specifics on something that
could be the most important thing in human history.
You know what?
The whole section was about 2 hours, and unless you're a die-hard fan of the topic or of either of the two men involved, it's not entirely worth the watch, in my opinion. Also on Monday, TheDrive.com posted an article titled, "The Strangest Encounters with Unidentified Aircraft We've Found in the FAA's Huge Database." The article combs through the many reports, most of which are centered around drones, multiple reports of UFOs, drone or otherwise, being spotted at nuclear facilities and or buzzing aircraft. To me, as someone who is perpetually waist-deep in bizarre material, none of these really leapt out to me, though there are a handful, 6, reports of disc or cylinder-shaped objects in there as well. It's interesting to me that we've reached the point where I am reading legitimate FAA reports of unidentified craft and going, Also interesting how just over the border, the Canadian equivalent of the FAA had many more and many more colorful reports. Yes, interesting. Real quick, on Tuesday, UAC, that Russian military aerospace firm that teased all the solutions to the UAP sightings or whatever, well, they had a huge press conference displaying their new tech, and it was just a jet, like I told you it was going to be. Just a normal-ass jet. Not an ass jet, a normal-ass jet, to clarify. Also, as far as eye-rolling nonsense that popped up on Tuesday, this video of an alleged UFO attempting to steal a cow and failing popped up on Reddit. Maybe I should have saved that for the goofy shit end segment. Anyway, it's obvious nonsense, but I saw in the comments a lot of people saying, how would you even fit a cow in that small of a UFO? Which reminded me of a video I saw on the Action Lab over on YouTube explaining how a 4-dimensional object would appear to a 3-dimensional being. Us. Here's a clip from that.
So I'm going to show you what it would look like if a 4-dimensional being was to move a 4D sphere through our 3-dimensional space. It would be similar to the 2-dimensional circle, starting small, getting bigger, and then going small again. But it would be in 3 dimensions. So it would look something like this. Okay, so here's my 4-dimensional ball. And what you're actually seeing is the very tip of the 4-dimensional ball. This is the small circle, but because we're in 3 dimensions, it's the small sphere at the tip of the 4th dimensional ball. And I can move it around and do anything I want with it, but watch what happens when I summon the powers of a 4th dimensional being to move the ball through the 4th dimension and through our 3D space. Well, it would look something like this. Okay, they're moving it through the 4th dimension, and as he's moving it, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And stop. So now you can see, as it got moved through the 4th dimension, the size changed in our 3 dimension here. So now we have a larger sphere, but we're not quite to the center of the 4-dimensional spheroid. So let's set it down and have the 4th dimensional being move it through the largest diameter that shows up in our 3 dimensions. Okay, and go. So now it's moving through the 4th dimension, which is making the sphere get bigger and bigger and bigger in our 3 dimensions. Until finally we end up with this. So now the 4-dimensional spheroid is at its largest diameter in our 3-dimensional space. And so now I have a very large sphere.
Entirely fascinating. Make sure you give them a sub. They're great. They put out great content. Honestly, I might as well give John Greenwald his own segment on this show. It seems like he's popping up at least once a week, and more often than not 2 or 3 times. Anyway, on Wednesday, John Greenwald over at the Black Vault posted some pretty interesting news. UAP Task Force initiated contact with NASA to brief them on UFOs, but they won't say why. Previously, we had heard from NASA that they were not looking into these things, and then later we heard from Bill Nelson, the current head of NASA, that he had a deep interest and they had begun to look a little closer at the UAP situation. However, in these documents, it seems to show that NASA had been regularly, as in once a week in some instances, been in contact with the UAP task force. The regularity suggests, in my opinion, updates. Although, beyond discussing the various objects that are regularly seen near NASA missions and the ISS, there is no hint as to what may have been transpiring. It's really strange to have every conversation some stone dude on a back porch looking up at the sky at night had turn out to be kind of accurate. NASA's in on it, man. Yeah, Travis? Kind of. Okay, so that's just 3 fucking boatloads of UAP stuff. I swear, I'm trying to minimize it. So on Thursday, I went in a totally opposite direction, one I usually don't bother with. Ghosts! But by the time I went back to the material I had saved to collect the videos and write this script, both of the videos that I found even vaguely interesting had been deleted, and the comment sections of them were filled with debunkers, which is usually how it goes. Don't get me wrong, I'm open to the idea. I've seen some weird shit myself. But as far as the topic goes, it just seems to be the most reliably disproven, evasive, and unrepeatable aspect of the phenomenon. And to be honest, thanks to pop culture, it now lacks the most mystery of any of it all. It would certainly help if one of the 8,000 ghost hunting YouTube shows or History Channel shows actually, I don't know, hunted one and caught some definitive evidence. Again, I'm open to the idea, but... John Keel, in my opinion, is one of the most important researchers and analysts of the phenomenon in modern history. A former journalist and well-respected editor who in later years dedicated his entire life to investigating all aspects of the phenomenon, which, to be clear, is literally everything we talk about on this show. And in my opinion, came incredibly close to, if not actually figuring out, the answers to the whole thing. Again, that is my opinion. Many people agree, many people disagree. Well, on Friday, over at johnkeel.com, a website that archives a lot of his personal writing and literary ephemera, a document was posted that's dated 1967 that seems to just list his conclusions of the UAP phenomenon as he understood it through thousands of interviews and much field research. The list covers a number of points that, to the average person, may seem incredibly bizarre and almost outright dismissible. But to anyone well-versed in ufology and contactee reports, the points discussed fall pretty clearly in line with everything we've already heard elsewhere. It's certainly not an entry point into the phenomenon for anyone new to the topic, or even to Keel's work in general. For that, I would recommend the Mothman prophecies. But it's certainly worth the read. On the most recent episode of the podcast, I discussed Christianity's history with dogmen or dog-headed men. Since reading Linda Godfrey's book, The Beast of Bray Road, I have found the topic to be incredibly fascinating, and I do my best to keep up with the modern dogmen reports. For the most part, the only way to really do that is to keep up on the r/dogmen subreddit. Unfortunately, that subreddit is, for the most part, a useless mess. Sorry, guys. However, on Saturday, this picture popped up, showing what was claimed to be a dogman peering in a window in Arizona. To me, this seems to be a normal dog, wolf, canine in general, hunched up. But I'm not a cynologist nor a cynocephalologist. Regardless of whatever the hell this thing is, it can stay the hell away from me. Alright, so was that potential cryptid a little too vicious for you? How about a nice chill guy? Because it's time for paranormal goofy shit. This week, just a nice little sticker somebody spotted of John Keel's good buddy, the Mothman. Just maxin' and relaxin'. Live, laugh, lurk, dude. Live, laugh, lurk. Anyway, that's our week. If you see something throughout the week that you would like me to discuss either on this show or on the podcast, send it my way. Hit us up on any of the socials or directly at lowstrangeness@gmail.com. If you would like more in-depth discussion of aspects of the phenomenon, make sure you check out our podcast, Low Strangeness. As I said earlier, we are currently in our off week, although next week's a pretty wild episode. I'm also in pre-production of another podcast that's not paranormal. I'm a man with many fingers and many pies. That's called A Scene in Public, which will be focused more on books that I have written in the past 10 years or so. So when that's live, check it out. I'll remind you. Also, please check out my friends over at The Graveyard Goons, a paranormal themed prank call show. Hilarious, Great. Get your spooky chuckle on. Guys, I'm going to force that to be the tagline. Anyway, once again, I am Asa Morris. Thank you so much for joining us, whether again or for the first time. Make sure you do the big 5, like, share, comment, sub, bell. And of course, check out our link tree for all the links to all the things, the socials, the merch, the podcast, and the Patreon, especially the Patreon. Take care of yourselves and the people around you, and I'll see you next week when I'm sure I'll say,